USA Today called you the modern day Shawshank Redemption story, which is a pretty tall thing to say, right? Why do you think they said that?
First of all, I want to say that USA Today article, the guy did a great job. And when he first brought this up, Doug, he said, "Hey, man, this is like a modern day Shawshank." And then he said, "You're like a real life Andy Dufresne." And I'm like, "Whoa, brother, I get what you're going with that. I understand the comparison. I'll explain the comparison in a second." I said, "I understand the comparison, but there's a big difference. Andy was an innocent man, and I was guilty of everything they said." Doug, in 2004, I was a stockbroker in Dallas, and I had it all, man. I had this incredible life growing up in Texas. I was a high school football star, played Division I college football at the University of North Texas, starting quarterback for a Division I team at 20 years old. But an injury set me back in college. My career was over after 2 short years of playing college football. Then I got into drugs, and but I was a pretty functional addict. Graduate college, move off to Washington, D.C. I had jobs like working in the United States Congress. I worked for a guy running for president of the United States. Then I worked on Wall Street for UBS as a broker in Dallas. And that was in 2004 where I tried meth for the first time. Another broker introduced me to meth. And the wheels came off, Doug. I mean, the whole life fell apart. In 18 months, I tell people all the time, it took about 18 months for me to go from working on Wall Street to living on the streets of Dallas, Texas. And I was homeless. And this is when the world of addiction really comes in. I believe addiction, the definition of it is when you give up your goals to meet your behavior. That's an addiction. That's an addiction definition, right? When you give up goals to meet a behavior, you've got addiction issues. And addiction doesn't have to be drugs or alcohol. This is food, money, clothing, shopping, sex, pornography, social media, whatever it is that you give your time to instead of your goals and dreams. And once I was living on the streets, I became a criminal. And it was petty crimes, shoplifting, breaking into cars. Then it escalates to a very serious crime called home burglary. And when I broke into people's houses, Doug, I didn't just steal their property. I stole their sense of security. I was a bad guy. Never physically hurt anybody, right? These burglaries go on for about 3 years in Dallas, from 2005 to 2008. They call them the Uptown burglaries. They actually called me the Uptown burglar. This is before they even knew who I was. But on July 30th, 2008, a Dallas SWAT team put an end to the Uptown burglaries. The day that SWAT arrested me, or as I tell people now, looking back on the story, July 30th, 2008 wasn't just the day I was arrested. It was the day I was rescued. I get pulled up in a situation I couldn't get myself out of. A year later, I go to this trial, and it's not a burglary case, Doug. It's a RICO case. It's organized crime, and I'm the boss of the entire thing. And at the end of a long 6-day trial, the jury brought me back in the courtroom, and they sentenced me to 65 years, or 6 dimes and a nickel in prison slang. 65 years in prison, a life sentence. And, it was after being sentenced to life in prison that I had a conversation with another inmate. My mom, right after I got sentenced, she made me promise I wouldn't get into any gangs while I was there, no tattoos. She's like, "You weren't raised to be a racist. Don't get into this prison culture thing." So I meet this old black Muslim guy in county jail, a guy named Muhammad. And Muhammad shares with me the story of the coffee bean. He said, "This is how you're going to turn around." He said, "Prison's like a pot of boiling water." And you know this, Doug. You've been to prison. He said, "Prison's like a pot of boiling water. You got 3 choices. Be like a carrot that becomes softened by the boiling water, an egg that becomes hardened by the boiling water, or a coffee bean which changes the pot of boiling water into a pot of coffee." And that's what he's telling me. You got to be like this coffee bean inside that prison. And Doug, I tell you, man, that was the message that really turned around for me. I truly understood that I had the power to determine my future, right? The power was inside me to change the world around me. And that's what I did, Doug. I went to prison. Prison was the hardest thing I've ever been through. It was, I went to the worst kind of prison there is, a maximum security level 5. That's where the toughest cases go in there. Life sentence people like me. I had a life sentence. And I fought for my life for the first 2 months. But once I got past the initial part of fighting, I started transforming myself and becoming that coffee bean inside there. And I found that prison is a hopeless place. That's why prisons get so dangerous, Doug. Because when you have a void of hope, negativity, evil, darkness fills the void. It's like in your story, right? You meet this guy, this cellmate that gets you on fitness, and you had hope again. Is it the thing that gave you hope? Shawshank Redemption was a movie that's all about hope, Doug. And in fact, if you really think about the movie Shawshank, and this is not something I picked up on when I first saw it in 1994, this arrogant, cocky college quarterback that watches Shawshank for the first time. Hell, I thought Shawshank was about this prison break, right? But when I got into prison and I started seeing Shawshank on the day room TVs, I realized Shawshank, it wasn't even about Andy Dufresne, the main character, right? The story is about the guy named Red, Morgan Freeman's character. That's the redemption story. I'll tell you why it's Red's story, not Andy's story. So Red is our narrator. When you meet Red for the first time, he's a dead man walking. Red has no hope. You meet the rest of the men in Shawshank. You know, Red gets denied parole the first scene you meet him in. There's a reason why his first scene is a parole denial. It shows you the world, no hope that he lives in. The rest of the men in Shawshank that he hangs out with are all dead on the inside, Doug. All they can do is wager on who's going to break on the prison bus first. Remember Brooks, the old man? Brooks made parole after 50 years, but Brooks lasted 2 weeks in the free world. He hung himself. He wrote a letter back to the boys in Shawshank, told him what he did and why he did it. And as Andy read that letter out to the men in Shawshank prison, every man in Shawshank understood why Brooks did what he did because they had the same hopeless mindset. Andy tells us, he tells Red, you know, Red, hope is a good thing, man. And he said, you got to get busy living or get busy dying. Red sees his world in a smaller place. Red says, Andy, hope is a dangerous thing. Hope can drive a man mad. You got to go back and rewatch Shawshank Redemption. And you watch Red walk out after 40 years. You don't know if Red's going to make it, right? He walks by the pawn shop. The guns are in the window. He stays in the same room that Brooks hung himself in. But Red makes it. He makes it to the rock wall Andy told him to go to. And he finds the letter that Andy left behind. And in that letter were the words that Red needed to hear when Andy said, Red, hope is a good thing. Maybe the best of things. And no good thing ever dies. You got to watch the end of Shawshank again, Doug, and your listeners. Watch the end, just the last scene on that beach in Mexico. Remember that beach in Mexico? Zihuatanejo, Mexico. That's what kept Andy Dufresne alive for 19 years. Andy always saw himself on that beach one day. And that's what we all have the power to do, but we sometimes forget to do when our life gets hard and our days spent away from us. Go back and watch the last scene, Doug. Listen to the dialogue of the character named Red at the end of the movie versus the dialogue of the character named Red at the beginning of the movie. Every single sentence that Red says in this last piece of dialogue starts off with two words. I hope. He tells you, I hope I make it across the border. I hope I see my friend again so I can shake his hand. I hope the Pacific is as blue as it was in my dreams. I hope. That's the last two words of Shawshank. I think the reason why the guy from USA Today, and I can see it, I think the reason why he makes the comparison with the modern day Shawshank is because my story is set inside of an environment just like Shawshank, a maximum security level 5 prison. But the story's the same story, Doug. It's about hope. It's about hope of overcoming adversity, finding the opportunity in adversity. You sit through a presentation of mine that I do in front of a group, a team, organization, whatever it is, and you go on this journey with this guy named Damon West, who's a storyteller. Because I believe that people learn from stories, Doug. I think that human beings have always learned from stories. We've either been educated by stories or we've been entertained by stories. But storytellers are the people that grab our attention. And that's what I've become, a really good storyteller about hope. And that's why the comparison was made.
You talk a lot about how you went from this guy who was hopeless to this coffee bean that not only changed yourself, but now is changing the lives of so many people around the world. But I'd love to get into like the nitty gritty of it. Like, what were some of the things specifically you had to do to completely transform your mindset, which isn't an easy task behind bars?
Yeah, that's a great question, Doug. And that's the thing that people are looking for, right? That's a good question for your audience because people want to know. You're inside of a dungeon, man. How did you do it inside of a dungeon? Doug, you ever read the book, The Count of Monte Cristo? You ever seen the movie, The Count of Monte Cristo? It's a great book. I think everybody should read The Count of Monte Cristo. Get the abridged version. The unabridged version is like 800 pages, but get the abridged version. But, Doug, I had to transform that dungeon. I had to make that dungeon into my cocoon, and it was hard, man. This is the hardest environment on earth. Well, let me walk you through prison when I first get there. First of all, Muhammad tells me when you get to prison, understand this. Prison is all about race. Race runs the whole institution inside of a prison. He said you're going to be approached first by the white gangs because you're white. You're going to fight them all. The Aryan Brotherhood, the Aryan Circle, the White Knights, the Woods, you'll fight them all. If you survive the white gangs, you fight the black gangs. That's the way it works in there. Everybody breaks off of their own kind. He said, but if you survive all that, you'll earn the right to walk alone. He said the strongest man in prison always walks alone. He told me the truth about fighting before I went to prison, Doug. This is the truth that set me free then and it sets me free now. He said, you don't have to win all your fights, but you do have to fight all your fights. Some days you win, Some days you lose. He said, it's okay when you lose. You just get back up and you keep fighting. And that's what I did, Doug. I got to prison. I got to a maximum security level 5 prison in Texas. And look, man, in the first 20 minutes, I was fighting a guy from the Aryan Brotherhood. And I live with the lifers, man. This is like an island inside prison. Fighting a guy from the Aryan Brotherhood, first 20 minutes, get my butt kicked. First fight I ever get into in prison, man. And that's what fighting looked like for me. I probably got in 3 dozen fights in the first 2 months, and I lost 75% of these fights, Doug. I'm getting my butt kicked all over prison. But I keep winning the fights. I keep stacking these wins because I keep showing up to the fight. I've blocked out the idea that I have to win, and I just have to show up. And I think that's one of the secrets to life, Doug. You just got to get up and show up every day. Sometimes the victory in life is just waking up the next morning, putting one foot in front of the other. That's a big win. I think people forget to count that as a win, right? You got up the next day. 2 weeks it took to get through the white gangs. After that, it was the black gangs. And I mean, this goes on for weeks, man. It's 6 weeks into prison before I finally make this decision to go out to the rec yard and earn some respect at that. Now, look, Doug, the rec yard on a maximum security prison, level 5, it's the hardest place in the world to be in, man. It's the most segregated place to be in, too. Every sport is segregated by the color of your skin. It's like going back in time. You know, you go out there, they got a sand volleyball court. That's for the whites and Hispanics. Handball, that's for anybody that wants to play handball. All the races can play handball. But if you want to play doubles in the game of handball, your doubles partner has to be the same skin color as you. The weight stack is the same thing. Everybody sticks to their own race. You want someone to spot you or work out with you? Same skin color. Chow hall, you eat your meals at a table with people that look like you. So a Monday morning, 6 weeks into prison, I go out to the rec yard and I pass up all those other sports and I go straight to the basketball court. Now, Doug, the blacks are on the basketball court. I mean, no white boys that look like me are allowed in that court. But the reason why I chose to go play basketball that Monday morning to earn my respect is because I know that in America, sports is the great uniter. Sports is the one thing that brings us together like nothing else can. I mean, you know, you think about the history of this country. Before there was Martin Luther King Jr., there was a guy named Jackie Robinson. Before you could integrate lunch counters in the South, you integrated locker rooms in the South. I knew sports would be the thing that made me whole in there. And after a week of playing basketball with those guys, I finally earned my right to exist. And I didn't have to fight anymore. And that's when I started working myself. But here's the first thing that had to happen. I had to change the way I think, Joe. Your thinking is everything, right? And if you think it's the worst situation in the world, you're going to be in the worst situation in the world. But if you can change your mindset, no matter what environment you're in, you can bloom where you're planted. I got up every day in the dungeon, Doug, and I convinced myself that prison was no longer a punishment to me. Prison was my opportunity. This was the mindset shift that had to happen for me to become the person I am today. When I woke up every day in a dungeon, I started seeing the potential in life instead of like the dread of this life. I realized that I had 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to work on me. I thought to myself, you know, Damon, you'll never get this opportunity again because when you get out to the free world again one day, whenever that is, you're going to have a lot of demands on your time. In prison, I had all the time in the world to work on me. And that's what I did, Doug. I worked on myself. Here's what I believe in life. I believe that you have to work on yourself before you can work on anybody else. You can't give what you don't have. You have to take care of yourself first before anybody else. And the way you do this is you work out in 3 areas every day and you make this uncompromisable. You don't compromise on this. Every day you give yourself time to work out on yourself spiritually, mentally, and physically. Every day work out your mind, your body, and your soul. You know, people ask me all the time, Doug, what was your mental workout when you were in prison? I'll give you my mental workout. My mental workout is reading the right books, feeding yourself the right stuff. You know, I didn't watch TV in prison. I don't watch TV out of prison, Doug. I don't have cable TV in my house. It's too crazy out there, right? I don't care if it comes from the left or the right. There's so much negativity out there. I focus on filtering the stuff that comes into my mind because you are what you eat. That's not just about food. That's everything you feed this brain of yours up here. The spiritual workout. I got into a 12-step program recovery in prison, Doug, and I learned how to pray. And I'm still in that 12-step program recovery to this day. I still work the steps, got a sponsor. And every morning I start my day off with the same prayer I've been praying since 2011 in prison. I get up in the morning and say, hey, God, put in front of me what you need me to do today for you, and let me recognize that when I see it because I don't want to miss whatever that thing is. Amen. That's my prayer every day, Doug, because if I can live that prayer out, then I'm useful again. I'm a servant leader. I'm serving other people. That's my prayer. Meditation comes next, man. I believe prayer is when you talk to whatever you think God is, and then meditation is when you listen to whatever you think God is telling you. And every day, Doug, I got to work on myself physically, man. I got into shape, just like you did when you were locked up. You got to take that time to work on yourself, man. Good mind, body, soul.
And taking this one step further, I think that, you and I have had this conversation that, 99% of the population will never have to go into prison, let alone like maximum security prison, right? Yet those same people, that same percentage of people will eventually be trapped in some sort of mental prison that's non-physical at some point in their life. And a lot of those people stay trapped for a long time. What do you think is the best way for people to escape the mental prison of their mind?
Dude, that's the $1,000,000 question you just asked, right? Because I meet more people out here in the free world that are locked up than I ever did when I served time in a real prison. More people are in prison by their thoughts and by their things and by their prejudices than by steel bars and barbed wire and concrete combined. I'm going to repeat that for the audience. More people are in prison by their thoughts, their things, and their prejudices than by steel bars and barbed wire and concrete combined. So many people get so locked up here. And Doug, that's the hardest prison to get out of, right? That's the hardest place to make parole from. In my life, in my story, I did 7 years and 3 months in a maximum security level 5 prison in Texas. I made parole in 2015, and I'm on parole for the rest of my life. I get off parole in the year 2073. So I have to figure out a way to stay free on the inside if I'm going to stay free on this outside, right? Because it's very easy to slide back into a negative world when you have parole hanging over you. But Doug, here's what I think people miss out on. I think people out here in the free world miss out on the fact, miss out's not the right term. You and I have had this benefit of going into a world where our freedom, physical freedom, was lost, right? And I say it's a benefit because we're on the other side of it now. We don't have a lot of the negative consequences that come with it. I mean, you're a super successful guy now, Doug. I've become a very successful guy myself. But we wake up every day. I promise you wake up the same way I do, man. Just breathing fresh air. You're in freedom, right? You know what it's like to lose your physical freedom. Most people will never understand that. Most people will never have a real SWAT team come into their living room. I realize that, Doug, in my story. But here's the deal. The SWAT teams of life come for you in different ways. Here's what the SWAT team of life looks like. A bankruptcy, a divorce, a marriage failing, a job is lost, something happens to one of your kids, a family member dies, one of your pets dies, something big happens in life, a life-altering event. I call those the SWAT teams of life. But it's when we get to a place of freedom in our minds that we start looking at these situations of adversity and look for the opportunity inside of them. Like when I tell you, Doug, the SWAT team didn't just arrest me, they rescued me. I mean that. I look back at July 30th, 2008. That was the day that angels came in through my windows and my doors, and they pulled me out of this world that I was in. I think the true freedom comes from anytime we see the adversity in life, we ask, what lesson is there in this for me, and how can I grow from this? That's when you start seeing the potential in every situation in life. And the adversity doesn't bring you down, but it springs you up to a different place.
And I think what also happens is that people, they get trapped in that frame of mind for years, right? They're just used to making excuses for why they're not where they want to be in life, given how their life has shaked out. And like you mentioned, like the SWAT team will come in some form, but the problem is most people don't catch it in time, and they spend months or years of their life trapped, imprisoned by that event. And it's hard. So like knowing what you know about frame of mind, mindset, people you've talked to, is there any kind of daily practice somebody could do to like really, revamp the way they see themselves, the way they see their life, and rebuild confidence?
Yeah. So here's something I think on the spiritual level, because I think this has to happen on the spiritual level. And big difference between spirituality and religion, right? I don't think the two are the same. I think spirituality is your conscious contact with whatever you call God. It can be anything you want to believe in, and because that's the reality of life. You can believe whatever you want to believe in. Whatever helps you get through life, believe in that. It's a big universe out there. But I think you have to have a spiritual awakening for any big change to happen in life. What happened in my life, Doug, was a spiritual awakening. That's how my prison cell became a cocoon. And when you have this spiritual awakening, you turn over this idea of control. You ask for a daily routine, something to help you out in life. Here's what I found. Whenever I started going to these 12-step meetings in prison, we started off all these meetings with that beautiful prayer, Doug, called the Serenity Prayer. You know the Serenity Prayer, right? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I had no clue how powerful that prayer was until one day the sponsor that brought the meetings in from the free world said, hey, Damon, today we're going to diagram the Serenity Prayer. And he has a chalkboard behind him in the prison chapel, draws a line from one side of the chalkboard to the other. And he said, Damon, that line is God's line. Now remember, Doug, when we talk about God, we're talking about whatever you believe your higher power is. He said, that line on the chalkboard, Damon, is God's line. He said, God's line is infinitely long. It's bigger than the chalkboard. Goes from one horizon universe to the next. You can't fathom how big this line is. He said the first part of the prayer, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. He said the things you can't change are on God's line. And every time you try to touch something on God's line, you hurt yourself and you hurt other people because you're not God. And God doesn't need your help doing his job. Stay off of God's line because you got your own line. So he goes and erases a little inch out of that big God line. And he held his fingers up an inch apart for the entire room to see. He said, if God's line's infinitely long, there's your line. You got 1 inch. One little inch. He said the second part of the prayer. He said, the courage to change the things I can. He said, the things you can change, Damon, are your little 1 inch line. And on that little 1 inch line are the 4 things that you control in life. These are the 4 things God gives you to work on every day. He said, here's the things you have control over. You control what you think, what you say, what you feel, and what you do. What you think, what you say, what you feel, and what you do. He said, if it's not one of those 4 things, you have no control over it. He said, what I'm telling you is, Damon, the world wasn't around you. You can't control the world around you, but you can control the world inside you. He said the last part of the Serenity Prayer was the most important part of the entire prayer. The wisdom to know the difference between this big line, Doug, and your little line. I can't tell you how many times a day in my life now, and how many times a day in my life inside that prison, I walk up to situations in life, and I look at it, I assess it, and I say, you know what? That's not on my line. And once I started separating out what's on my line and what's on God's line, then I was focusing my time. The most precious resource you have, Doug, is your time. All the money in the world won't buy one more second of that stuff, man. They're not making more of that stuff. You can't get any more time. The most precious thing you have. It's the great equalizer. It affects every single person the same way. But once you start focusing your time on the things you can actually change, the things you can't control, the things you can impact, your life takes off in a whole different direction. You leave all these other people behind because your time is spent on things you can actually change. That was a big thing for me, Doug. And that's the thing I still live this life to this day. It's hard too, Doug. Talk about hard, man. Hard is walking away from things you think you have control over, but realizing you don't and just let them happen how they're supposed to happen.
One of the things that traps people, that really holds people back, is them living with regret, remorse, focusing on their past. How did you come to terms with all the wrong that you did in your life?
Damn good question, Doug. So the 8th step in this 12-step program is when you make a list of all the people you've harmed. All right. You become willing to make amends to all these people. The 9th step, Doug, is when you go out and you start making those amends. And this is when you start making apologies to people. And I think it's very important for us to acknowledge the wrongs we've done and to go and make apologies for the things we've done wrong, because that's good. Apologies do a couple of things. One, you free the other person from the harm you did to them by giving them the closure of the apologies. Second of all, you free yourself, right? I mean, when you make a list of all the people you've harmed in the 8th step, you're on that list too. One of the biggest resentments I had in life was against me. That was the biggest resentment I had to turn over and forgive. But here's the thing, Doug. In my life as a criminal, a former criminal, the people I've harmed in the state of Texas that I committed crimes against, I can't ever apologize to them. The state of Texas has a law, Doug. It says you can't apologize to the victim of your crimes. They send you back to prison in Texas if you reach out to make apologies. So my victims are never going to hear me say, I'm sorry, because I can't say that to them. I can't ever make an apology to them. But they have this built-in mechanism in the 12 steps. It's called a living amends. And a living amends is when you go out and do good deeds for the apologies you can't make and you expect nothing in return. And that's what I've done with my life. I've made this life about living amends. It's what I do when I help the children of incarcerated parents. And I started, we'll talk about me finding Muhammad and start a scholarship in his name. There's different things that go out there. SWAT team, what I'm doing with them now. I go out there and do these good deeds and I expect nothing in return because that's how I make the apologies to people I can never make apologies to. Living amends are so important to me. My new book, 6 Dimes and a Nickel, I have a whole chapter on living amends and why they're so important. Because here's the deal. If you have a resentment, and this resentments can be against a person, a place, a thing, an institution. If you carry a resentment inside you, it's like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. They eat you up from the inside out. And the thing that I've learned about resentments, Doug, the person, the place, the group you resent, whatever it is, most of the time they don't know you resent them. They don't care. And when they find out, they still don't care. They don't even know. So resentments are something you have to let go of. It's like carrying a bag of rocks around with you in life. Every night, this is what I still do as a spiritual workout. Every night, I lay in my bed and I ask myself, Damon, were you a good person today? What did you do to put back in the stream of life? Do you owe someone an apology? And every night I've got to remind myself that I want to be forgiven for the things I've done wrong in life, which also means I have to forgive everybody else that wrongs me. Forgiveness is a two-way street, Doug. Let go of the things that hold you back in life. The people that you don't forgive and people you resent, let go of that because it only holds you back.
I know you spent quite a bit of time in prison thinking about this certain person that you stole from. I think you recently got an email from them as well. Talk about that battle in the mind of thinking, ruminating about the people that you hurt once you get out of that fog and you start to realize all the wrong you've done in life.
Yeah, this is the chapter of my book is called The Healing Power of Forgiveness, 6 Dimes and a Nickel. And it's I'm not going to go into all the details here. I go into the details of the book about what was stolen from this person. But for the sake of time in this podcast, so it was July of 2008. It was the last weekend of the crime spree for the Uptown Burglaries. My partner in crime, Dustin, and I, we broke into this lady's apartment. And we stole something from her. Doug, this is the biggest victim of my entire crime spree. I mean, this is the person. Put it this way, Doug. This is the person I think about the entire time I'm in prison. This is the thing I carry with me. And it's my penance. I tell myself it's my penance. I'm supposed to think about this person every day, what I did to them, the harm that I caused them, the pain that I caused them, because the thing that we stole from her couldn't be replaced. And so I carry this around with me. And I'm working a 12-step, Doug. But understand this. It's spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. I don't have this thing figured out to where I'm a perfect person. I don't have everything figured out to where my program works seamlessly. I still carry this resentment around against me because of this one person that I harmed so bad. And remember, I can never apologize to this person. I'm never going to apologize to this person because I can't. The 8th step says you don't make the apology, or the 9th step says you don't make the apology if it will cause you or the other person harm. And so me going back to prison would definitely cause me harm and my family harm. But I carry this around with me. I get out of prison still every day. I can't shake it. Even though I'm out of prison, I can't shake the thought of what I did to this person. So a few years ago, I do this story in Dallas. And Doug, I've been trying to avoid Dallas the entire time I've been out of prison because all my victims are in Dallas. The crime spree happened in Dallas. But this reporter named Kevin Reese, he does this, he talks to me about doing this story. And he's like, Damon, we're not going to retell the story of the Uptown Burglaries. We know the story of the Uptown Burglar. He said, but the story of what the Uptown Burglar's doing now, that's the real story, man. This is the story, the redemption story, right? So we do this story, Doug, and it's an incredible story. Does a great job. Even allows me in the story to tell the audience I was a bad guy. I was a scumbag, I harmed all these people. I didn't ever physically hurt anybody, but I stole people's sense of security. And so that comes out in the story. He did a really good job. So the story ends. I get 2 emails the night after the story airs. The first email is from one of the detectives that took me down. not a good email, Doug. This guy in the email, he's not convinced. Let's put it that way. He's looking at me, over a decade later, and he's like, you were a bad guy then, you're a bad guy now. Basically, is what he's saying. I don't believe a word of it. And I sat there with that email for a second. I thought about why he would say that, and I thought to myself, you know what? He's entitled to his opinion. Here's another lesson in life, Doug. Other people's opinions of you are none of your business. He's entitled to his opinion. He represented society when he took me down. I broke the social contract, Doug. I deserved to be taken down. I needed someone to take me down. I needed to go to prison. So he represented that, and he has some hard feelings about that. He's entitled to his opinion. But I did not reply to his email because he's entitled to his opinion, and I'm not a criminal anymore. He has no power over me anymore. So I let it go. The next email I got froze me in my tracks. It was from a name I didn't recognize. And the subject line of the email says, "Damon, I forgive you." I open it up, Doug. It's her, the biggest victim of my crime, the first person to take the stand in my trial. She was witness number one, right? This was because what we stole from her was such a big deal that, it was the biggest victim, Doug. I can't stress how big of a victim this was. And she writes me this email, and it's a painful email, Doug. She is going through the struggle of she's walking me through it of when she walked into her apartment that day in July of 2008, and she ran straight for the safe, and that item was gone. And the emotional struggle that she went through, she's telling me this in an email. And I'm reading it, Doug, because I have to read this because I owe it to the victim, one, to listen to what she's saying to me, and two, this is the penance for when you do something wrong. You have to hear what you did wrong. But she gets to the last part of the email, and this is the part in the chapter of the book called The Healing Power of Forgiveness. This is what she says to me, Doug. "With that, I'd like to say, I forgive you. I'm moving on in the hope that you're a genuine person with a good heart, and the hope that you put others before money or fame as you share your story. And the hope that you and your family never experience great loss or violation. Most importantly, in the hope that you feel peace in knowing that we are saved from the mistakes we make in this world, thanks to the unfailing love of Christ." Thanks to the unfailing love of Christ. Life is such a gift. May you live it to the fullest, Damon. Doug, first of all, I never thought I would be forgiven for what I did. I never could apologize for what I did, and I still can't apologize for what I did. But her reaching out and showing me the power of forgiveness. If this person could forgive me for what I did wrong to her, then how can you not forgive someone that's done wrong to you, right? How can any of us hold anything back against someone else? She showed me in that email the healing power of forgiveness. She freed herself, and she freed me also in the process. And this lady's telling me to live my life to the fullest, Damon. Let it go too. Doug, I felt like a weight was immediately lifted off me. I don't know. I don't think, there's a part of me that thinks I'm not worthy of that. But then the other part of me is like, hey, Damon, you know what? You're paying your debts. You're going out, you're making these living amends. You're going out trying to change the world, make it a better place. Accept the forgiveness and go. And that's what I've done, Doug. That story, that victim, it's something I'll never get out of my mind. And I think it's something that we can all learn from what she did. She let it go, man. And she gave it to Christ.
This episode is brought to you by Timeline Nutrition. Listen, my main goals for the remainder of the year revolve around health and vitality. After hearing about Timeline Nutrition from several of my friends in the health industry, I decided to give their flagship product, MitoPure, a try. MitoPure contains urolithin A, which is a powerful postbiotic that can be challenging to get from your diet. As you know, science has been a big focus on the podcast, so I was really impressed that Timeline has done 10 years of research to bring this product to market. I've been taking their berry powder for over a month now, and have already noticed a bit of a difference in the gym. Some of the long-term benefits I'm hoping to achieve from taking it include improved energy, muscle strength, and endurance, which are right in line with my goals. So I highly recommend you check out Timeline Nutrition, and they are now offering 10% off your first order of MitoPure. So just go to timeline.com/Doug to get 10% off your first order of MitoPure. That's TIMELINE.com/Doug. Now back to the show. Powerful, powerful stuff, man. Thanks for sharing. You talk about that story and how emotional you get and the emotion that's attached to that given the circumstances. I know, like in your first book and when you first started telling your story, you talked about like this. It's like this now. It's become kind of famous talk your mother gave you before you went to prison, right? And talked about how she raised you and that you completely wronged your family, all that stuff. What was harder to grapple with? What you just shared, or like the fact that you really let your mother down?
That's a good question. Man, I don't know, Doug. I don't know. They were both extremely difficult. It's a very, very good question. Um, so the story with my mom, there's a lot of layers to it because for me to get to the place where she's talking to me behind a bulletproof glass after I'd just been sentenced to life in prison, a lot of things had to happen. In my first book, The Change Agent, I share the biggest failure of my life. The biggest failure of my life, the biggest wrong I've ever done wasn't to this woman that I read the story about. It was my grandmother. I was deep into my meth addiction when Hurricane Rita hit. My parents lived about 6 hours away on the Gulf Coast. And Hurricane Rita destroyed their home. And my dad had to drive his mother, my grandmother, up to Dallas to live with me because their home was destroyed. Family's in crisis. Doug, I'm barely surviving at this point. In fact, surviving is the right term. I've got an apartment in uptown Dallas that I haven't paid the rent on in a long time. In fact, the apartment has been taken over by cartel guys because I owe so much to the cartel guys for all the dope, the meth that I'm doing. But I get the call that my grandmother's coming to live with me in 2005. And so, 2004, 2005, 2004. So, my dad drives her up there. The cartel guys split. They leave because they know my grandmother's coming. But as soon as my grandmother comes to live with me, man, she is living in my bedroom in that 2-bedroom apartment that I have with my roommate. And we're both so deep in this meth world. And I keep her locked away in that bedroom because in the living room, all the cartel guys are coming in. They're cutting up their dope. They're making their stuff ready to sell. My dad gives me a credit card to take care of my grandma, her credit card. And the cartel guys see that, and I owe them so much money, they get that credit card. They're taking their family shop, Burlington Coat Factory. All these charges start showing up on the credit card. My dad's like, what is going on over there? And I never tell him the truth of what's going on, but I neglected my grandmother basically, Doug. You got to get that book, The Change Agent, to read the full story. I totally neglected my blood, my grandmother, man. The biggest failure of my life, right? And so when my mom is sitting there across that glass in 2009, she's telling me, Damon, debts demand to be paid, and you owe this debt to your father and I. There's a lot that comes with that debt. So it's probably a bigger failure to my mom and a bigger debt that I owe to my mom than anybody else on the planet because my mom and my dad raised me right, Doug. They gave me a great foundation. They had all the love and support and opportunities to be anything in life. And I blew through all of that. I became a drug addict. I became a criminal. I became a thief. And a jury had just given me a life in prison. But being able to turn that around, and my mom told me to come back as the man we raised or don't come back to us at all. Drew a big line in the sand, Doug. And being able to turn that around and becoming that man, Doug, this is a lot that's happened since the last talk. I got out of prison. I lived with my parents for the first 2 years I was out of prison. I lived in their spare bedroom. And they helped bring me back to life after prison. I wouldn't be here today without them. In prison, after prison. 2 years ago, my dad dies of stage 4 colon cancer. It happens fast. We found out in June that he had it. July 28th of 2023, he was dead. Before my dad died, he told me, he said, you got to take care of your mom. And I didn't know what that meant. But I watched my mom after my dad died, and she was deteriorating. She was lonely. She was depressed. She was living by herself. She lived about 15 minutes away. But, Doug, I'm on the road 20, 25 days a month, man. When you're on the road that much, you come home, she might as well live 100 miles away. I didn't get to see her much. didn't make it a priority, I'd say, to get over there every single time I was home for 24 hours. So it came to me this past summer. Kendall and I, my wife and I, decided we were going to build my mom a home on the property we have. And so December 23rd of this past year, a few months before this recording right now, my mom moved into her brand new home on our property. And I see my mom every time I'm home. In fact, after we get this done with this recording, I'm going to go see my mom. I take care of my mom now. And I've pulled my mom out of a dark place. The chapter in my book, The Change Agent, that talks about this very principle of life is turn darkness into light. Anytime you can turn darkness into light for somebody in life, you got to do that. My mom did that for me, and now I've done it for her. And I think every one of us has the power to turn darkness into light for someone else.
One of the things that really limits people in their life is how they identify with their past and their mistakes. You know, if you go down your rap sheet, right, you have every reason to limit yourself. You have every reason to think you're going to fail. You have every reason to think you're not going to make it. How do you not let that define who Damon West is? Outside of, I know the speaking helps, and that's really purposeful, but like inside your head, like how have you learned to not let those things articulate like the way you live your life?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? Because I think that everybody has had what I'm about to tell you that I go through and struggle with at times too, is the imposter syndrome. I'm being vulnerable. Vulnerability, I think, is a strength. And the imposter syndrome makes us feel like we don't belong. We're not worthy. And I deal with this too, Doug. I learned in prison this technique. It was an old Army Ranger that was in there. He was serving life. Everybody called him Ranger. And he told me that he doesn't listen to the thoughts in his head. He said the thoughts in his head, sometimes it's fear talking to you. You don't want to listen to the voice in your head, because if fear is talking to you and you listen to fear, you just listen to a liar, because he said fear is a liar. But he taught me how to stop listening to myself and start talking to myself. And so that's what I have to do to this day, Doug. I talk to myself. I tell myself, no, Damon, you're a worthy person. You belong in this room or wherever you are. You belong in this life. You deserve to have the nice things in life. You worked hard to get here. You're a good person. I had to tell myself all the time these things, because the imposter voice, the voice of fear, it comes in my head too, man. I'm a human being. Remember, spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. One of the biggest events in my life where I had to do this, Doug, I'd been out of prison about 14 months, and I wanted to share my story. I didn't have anywhere to share my story really when I first got out, because look, I'm an ex-con. You know this, Doug. A lot of ex-cons that have come before us have burned the bridge to the ground. People have a bad taste in their mouth of ex-cons. I was trying to show people I was different, but that took time. It's like respect, man. You earn it by the spoonful, you lose it by the bucketful. And I just poured out buckets of respect in my life to get a 65-year sentence. But I'm on parole, living in my parents' spare bedroom. And there weren't a lot of places for me to speak, but in my parents' spare bedroom, there was a mirror in there. Just happened to be there when I moved, a little vanity mirror my mom had in that room. Every night for 2 years, I practiced my presentation in front of that mirror. I got in my reps, Doug. Because anything you want to be good at in life, you got to practice at in life. There's no such thing as an overnight success. That plaque behind you from YouTube, that didn't happen overnight. It took years for you to get that. Anything you want to be good at in life, you got to practice at in life. So every night for 2 years, I practiced my presentation in front of that mirror. I'm getting myself ready for the right opportunity. And I believe the right opportunity is going to come with the world of college football, because I played Division I college football. But the problem is, in 2017, it's been 20 years since I took a snap. The coaches don't know me. I don't know them. A buddy of mine sneaked me into this award show in 2017 called the Bear Bryant Coach of the Year Award. This is when they named the best college football coach in America. The 8 best coaches in this room, and he sneaks me in the back door, and I go around the room. I shake these coaches' hands, and I give them my pitch of why they should bring me to talk to their team. And in the first hour, 7 coaches tell me no. It's a bloodbath, Doug. It's a no every 8 minutes. And I'm standing in the corner of the Toyota Center that night. I'm licking my wounds. I'm feeling sorry for myself. 10 feet from the door, the voice in my head is telling me, go home, Damon. Leave, man. You don't belong in this room. The voice in my head is telling me I'm an imposter. But that night, I practiced this technique. I told myself, Damon, you survived prison, man. Doug, we got to remind ourselves sometimes of when we succeeded in life. Another chapter in the book, man. Remember when you succeeded and celebrate the wins, man. That night in the corner, I'm reminding myself, Damon, you survived prison. This isn't going to hurt like prison. And I celebrated that win of prison. And I told myself, Damon, go talk to the last coach. You came here to talk to 8 coaches. He's going to tell you no too, but you're going to ask your question before you leave. Another lesson in life that I cover in the book, always ask the question, because the only question you know the answer to, Doug, is the one you do not ask. That answer is no every time. So that night, Doug, I stalked Dabo Swinney around that room. Your friend Dabo Swinney too, man. I stalked Dabo out, and I finally get in front of Dabo, and I give him my pitch, and it falls so flat, Doug. He's like, man, you got a card on you? He's freaked out a little bit. And I gave him my card. He said, I'll check you out, and it was gone. But I've seen that before that night. That's a no. But I felt good about that no because I left it on the field. Doug, 4 months later, I get an email from Mike Dewey, the football ops guy at Clemson. He says, hey, man, Coach Swinney met your award show in Houston and wants you to come talk to the team. He said, do you have August 1st open? And I was like, Mike, I got every first open, man. I got nothing going on right now. And so on August 1st, 2017, I go speak to the Clemson Tigers, the defending national champions of college football. And after that presentation, my life changed because Dabo became that connector in life. Dabo started calling every coach in America. My next presentation was to Alabama. He calls Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Lincoln Riley, Chip Kelly, Lane Kiffin. But then Dabo becomes this connector with John Gordon. John goes to speak to Dabo's team a year later. It was 2018. And here's how it went down. Dabo told me the story recently. When I spoke to Dabo that first time in 2017, I brought him this little wooden coffee bean keychain. Didn't have much money, but I wanted to show Dabo some gratitude for bringing me in to talk to his team, being the one yes in that room full of no's. And Dabo put that keychain on his keychain. He loved it, man. He loved the coffee bean. Dabo took the coffee bean and ran with it too. So when John gets done in August 2018 that day, speaking to Clemson's team, he and Dabo go back to his office. Dabo pulls his keys out of his pocket. He throws them on the desk. John's eye catches that coffee bean on the keychain. And John said, hey, Dabo, what's that, man? What's that on your keychain? And Dabo said, that's the coffee bean. He said, do you know the story of the coffee bean? John's like, no, man, I've never heard the story of the coffee bean. He said, do you know Damon West's story? He said, no, man, I don't. Who's Damon West? And John is told the story, the whole story of mine by Dabo Swinney that day, and he's told the story of the coffee bean. John calls me up in 2018, Doug, and you know this because you were connected with John and I too. John's like, Damon, the world needs coffee bean message, Damon. Let's deliver this message to the world. He said, will you write a book with me? We'll call it The Coffee Bean. And so in the summer of 2019, Doug, the next year, this is about the time you and I know each other too, The Coffee Bean comes out. The book The Coffee Bean comes out. It took the world by storm. The whole world, man. In 2020, the world becomes a pot of boiling water, and the whole world's searching for the right message, and that's when so many people landed on the Coffee Bean guy. And that's when my life took off. But it all goes back to that one night in Houston, January 11th, 2017, the night that I had 7 no's, and I'm standing by the door, and the voice in my head is telling me, go home. The voice in my head told me I didn't belong in the room that night. But instead of listening to myself, I talked to myself, and I asked the question. The only question you know the answer to in life, Doug, is the one you do not ask. That answer is no every time. Wayne Gretzky actually said it best. Wayne Gretzky said, you miss 100% of the shots you do not take. You got to take your shots in life, Doug.
And speaking of like taking at shots and keeping the puck going forward, I know you're doing a lot to give back. Talk about the Coffee Bean Foundation, what you're doing to kind of pay the message forward.
Yeah, my wife and I started the Be a Coffee Bean Foundation. Doug, when I was in prison, I noticed all these guys in prison had the same exact story. My son and my daughter's out there. They're going down the same road I'm going down. They're making mistakes in life, generational incarceration, right? Or my son and my daughter's out there. They want to get involved in some extracurricular activity, but we can't afford it because I'm in prison. There's only one income out there. I told myself, if I ever get out of prison, that's the population I want to impact. The Be a Coffee Bean Foundation, Doug, I go around all year long raising money for this foundation. And what we do with that is we give any kid in America that has an incarcerated parent, they're eligible for up to $2,500 a year for an extracurricular scholarship. We call it the Coffee Bean CARES program. CARES is an acronym, stands for Cultivating Activities and Relationships Through Extracurricular Scholarships. CARES. Now, when the program works to the fullest, here's what happens, Doug. The parent that's in prison nominates the kid that's on the outside, their kid on the outside, right? We get in touch with the family member on the outside that's the guardian, the custodian, whatever, the parent of the kid. We say, hey, your kid has been nominated by the incarcerated parent, and we want to make your kid eligible for the scholarship. And when the program really works the best way, the way it's supposed to, the parent on the inside gets the scholarship for the kid on the outside. Now they got something positive to talk about, Doug. Now on these phone calls and the letters from prison, these visits, the parent on the inside can say, "Hey, how's karate going, man? How's dance going? Or how's that select sport coming along? How are the music lessons? I got you." That's repairing the parent-child bond, because no one goes to prison alone, Doug. When you go to prison, you take a lot of people with you, man. You take your victims, you take your family members, you take your friends that believed in you, you take the taxpayers on the ride. So we want to find a world where we can foster that parent-child relationship. Doug, one of the reasons why I chose to go and make children of incarcerated parents my focus is because, one, generational incarceration is real. It's a very real thing. Another reason is so many people have these criminal justice reform ideas out there, and they want me to get involved because my platform's grown so big, and I turn them all away. And some people, it angers. They're like, why won't you use your platform to help this cause? Because my cause, Doug, is for the children of incarcerated parents. So many causes that I see out there, they're against something, Doug. I mean, I don't want to be against something. I want to be for something. And no one can be against children of incarcerated parents because parents can't pick their kids. Another thing I've been able to do, this is really cool, Doug. I met the lady that started Elf on the Shelf. Her name is Shanda Bell. And Shanda Bell told me the story about how in 2020, the Elf on the Shelf company used my book. They used the coffee bean to help them get by in the world of the pandemic. Remember, no one was going to stores. No one's shopping anymore. And so Shanda Bell and I talked about this, what we could do. And so she donated 200 elves to me. Different sexes, different genders, different skin tones. And around October, November every year now, I go into the Texas prison system and I have an Elf on the Shelf day inside the prison. The parents that are incarcerated get to bring their kids from the outside, and they get their kid the elf. And the custodian, the parent that takes care of the kid on the outside, gets to understand the rules of the elf, hiding the elf and all that stuff. And you're going to probably be a father one day, so you need to know what this elf thing, Doug, because it's got to hide it every night, right? But the phone calls, the letters, and all the stuff that happened over the holidays this year in Texas prisons, where was your elf hiding? What was your elf doing? So there's a lot of stuff we get to do with kids of incarcerated parents. Another thing is I found Muhammad. That's the most frequent question I ever get in life, man. Have you ever found Muhammad? Yeah, I did. It took a long time to find Muhammad, and I finally found him, and he was dead when I found him. He had died of an opiate overdose in Dallas in 2017. So this is the guy that saved my life with the story of the coffee bean. I have to honor my friend somehow, so I found his family. And when I found his family, I asked his family if we could start a scholarship in his name. And I said, I'll fund it. Every year I put $10,000 into a trust for the James Lynn Baker II Be a Coffee Bean Scholarship. That's his real name, James Lynn Baker II. And every year his family picks the winner of that scholarship. And man, it's been great. The family picks the winner. And I mean, one of the winners is this little girl named Megan. Megan's mother's a school teacher. Her dad's a disabled veteran. Right now, Megan, she's sitting in class at Texas A&M. Megan's going to be an engineer one day, So there's a lot of different things I could do, like SWAT. The day after we record this, tomorrow, I'll be in Dallas delivering $10,000 more of gear that I've given to SWAT. When I went and talked to the Dallas SWAT team 15 years later, I told them, man, you saved my life. I thanked them for saving my life. I said, what can I do for you? Give me a list of all the equipment you need that DPD can get you or can't get you right now. Let me buy it for you so you can save other people's lives and be a positive impact in somebody else's life. And they sent me a list of about $20,000 worth of stuff. They took me up on it. So tomorrow I'll deliver the last $20,000 worth of gear to Dallas SWAT, and I have a great relationship with them now. Lots of good things in life. I just wake up every day looking for ways to serve other people. That's one of the tenets. You started this conversation out with a service work conversation. That's one of the main tenets about being in program recovery, serving other people. We have to serve other people to stay sober, Doug. And every day I got to look for ways. I got to live out that prayer. Put in front of me what you need me to do today for you, and let me recognize it when I see it.
Damon West, what an inspirational episode. I highly encourage people to check out Damon, to check out his two books, The Change Agent and 6 Dimes in a Nickel. Damon, thank you so much for coming back on the show.